Welcome, and prepare to journey into the hidden, fragrant truths of history as we uncover tales rarely told before the quiet of night. As you step into the grand throne room, a sense of profound reverence washes over you, as it is intended to. The walls gleam with gilded splendor, and countless mirrors reflect an infinite expanse of luxury. At the heart of this opulence sits a figure, a man presented as a god, or so the whispers suggest. Yet an unseen force shatters this illusion, not the dazzling glitter nor the majestic crown, but a subtle, pervasive odor. It is not the familiar scent of perfume or incense, but something ancient, something deeply unsettling from within. Beneath the rustling silks, a slow decay subtly unfolds. Beneath the regal crown, the very scalp it rests upon is marred by infection. This man, the embodiment of power, is slowly succumbing, a truth meticulously concealed from all eyes. This is not a mere metaphor, but the raw, tangible reality of monarchy, a truth that oozes beneath the veneer of grandeur.
He was known as the Sun King, a title that evoked brilliance, yet even the sun casts long, deep shadows. Louis XIV reigned over France for an astonishing 72 years, a period marked by the construction of Versailles, a palace so breathtakingly magnificent it was said to blind foreign emissaries. Its sheer vastness necessitated maps for navigation, and its adornments were so lavish that even the palace's unseen inhabitants, the lice, reputedly rested on gold-threaded bedding. However, if one were to press an ear close to the cold marble, a different reality would emerge. The wet shuffle of chamber pots echoing through grand corridors, the disturbing slap of human waste casually discarded from balconies into courtyards below. One might also discern the persistent cough of a servant, a stark reminder of long-forgotten hygiene, or the faint, rhythmic, and desperate scraping of courtiers discreetly battling an unseen torment beneath their ornate velvet cuffs.
As their bodies succumbed to decay, the courtiers intensified their efforts to conceal it, layering on paint and powders, not for restoration, but for a meticulously crafted distraction. The entire court, an elegant machinery of enforced silence, complied without question. No one dared to speak of the pervasive odors. To acknowledge the truth was not merely treason against the crown, but a betrayal of the grand illusion they collectively maintained. The king himself moved with a noticeable limp, his legs often oozing, his teeth progressively blackening and falling away. He would urinate into golden pots that frequently overflowed beneath his very throne. Yet still his subjects bowed in reverence, whispering of divine right and radiant blood. For them, the physical body could decompose, but the sacred image of royalty had to remain pristine. In the Queen's chambers, mornings often began with piercing screams from her maids, a grim ritual to dislodge the rats nesting in her elaborate wigs. These were not symbolic rats. They were real, drawn by the warmth, the grease, and the profound silence. The Queen, adorned in exquisite silks, would sit for hours, utterly still, as her towering rose-pinned hairpiece subtly trembled with the unseen movements of its unwelcome guests. The Queen's physician offered camphor, the priest advised patience, and the perfumer provided increasingly potent rose oil, yet bathing was never suggested. The unspoken truth was that the queen's scalp bled nightly, her skin beneath the thick powder itched until it cracked, and beneath every graceful gesture her body silently screamed. But silence was the true currency of the court, and to speak the truth meant forfeiting one's very position.
You see, rot extends far beyond a mere physical condition of the flesh. It is an intricate ecosystem. It begins with a seemingly small wound, a scratch, a refusal to cleanse it, and then comes the elaborate covering, a ribbon, a layer of powder, or even a grand title. Subsequently, those who observe learn to avert their gaze, the servants are trained into silence, and the nobles cultivate a deliberate ignorance. Gradually, this pervasive rot ceases to be confined to the individual and begins to infect the very essence of the throne itself. In Madrid, Queen Isabella of Castile famously declared bathing a heretical act, believing that cleansing the body invited lust, temptation, and pride. To her, dirt signified humility, body odor was a mark of devotion, and even sores were seen as signs of sanctification. The infamous Inquisition, known for its pursuit of heretics, extended its reach to hunt down the very concept of soap. Mothers would weep as they furtively hid their children's bath-water. Husbands faced denunciation from their wives for the sin of clean fingernails, and peasants were forcibly removed from homes simply because their linens appeared too white. They proclaimed that the devil himself washed frequently, and paradise, they believed, would carry the scent of unwavering faith, not the delicate aroma of lavender.
Consider a painting in the Louvre, a familiar image of a noble woman, radiant in gold, her face serene and untouched. Yet this masterpiece deliberately omits the hidden truths, the weeping ulcers concealed beneath her sleeves, the breath so foul that birds would flee her balcony, and the thick caked powder on her skin that cracked like old plaster. What the artist chose to exclude was the pervasive rot, not out of dishonesty, but because even he, over time, had become blind to its presence. And here lies the profound horror. They truly failed to notice. When the king's memory began to falter, they attributed it to the weighty burdens of his rule. When the queen's teeth decayed and fell, they paradoxically praised the grace of her smile. When the prince collapsed within his chambers, it was dismissed as mere exhaustion. But they were, in fact, slowly dying, from the toxic creams they applied, from the suffocating silence they maintained, and from the rituals they blindly followed. The Nician ceruse, a mixture of lead and vinegar, was considered sacred, believed to render the skin pale, holy, and untouchable. Yet this deadly concoction seeped into their blood and brains, gradually dissolving memory, sanity, and ultimately the very self. Each morning brought a new layer of poison, and each evening a descent into deeper madness. Still they bowed, still they smiled, and still they lit more candles, desperately trying to mask the omnipresent scent. The most powerful women on earth, queens and duchesses, often scratched their scalps raw, not from shame, but from sheer agony. Their elaborate hairpieces teemed with lice, and their majestic wigs crawled with fleas, concealing baldness beneath powdered helmets that reeked of stale meat. Despite these hidden torments, these very women wielded immense power, deciding the fates of nations and orchestrating wars. They arranged crucial treaties, even as insects fed on their blood, sang hymns while their flesh festered beneath rich brocade, and bore heirs, even as their own teeth crumbled to dust. There is no greater prison than the silent suffering endured for the sake of perceived beauty, no deeper madness than the preservation of power through constant pain. Let us pause here, not for respite, but for a moment of profound reverence, for these individuals were not merely victims of their own filth. They were, more profoundly, victims of overwhelming societal expectation. They were not diminished by weakness, but constrained by the very crowns they wore. Their grotesque reality was not inherent to their nature, but a cruel twisting by design, a direct consequence of a system that worshipped an impossible perfection and ruthlessly punished any deviation from its carefully constructed myth.
Consider the story of a particular king, not one remembered for grand conquests, but for a chilling detail recorded in his court documents. He could no longer sit for audiences without pustules breaking under his robes. This grim reality was not considered scandalous, rather it was simply expected. The royal body, often bloated and afflicted by illness, was not viewed as a private entity, but as a public instrument, its very existence belonging not to the individual, but to the royal lineage, the family crest, and the enduring myth of divine power. Even as his flesh visibly liquefied beneath luxurious velvet, and his attendants occasionally succumbed, collapsing from the overwhelming odor, he continued to rule. He dictated letters with fingers visibly marred by infection, sired children from a bed that reeked of sour wine and pus, and bestowed blessings upon his people with hand that trembled from fever. And remarkably, his subjects wept with gratitude, for in their eyes rot, when impeccably dressed, became nothing less than divine.
Elsewhere, in the frigid winter courts of Vienna, a duchess observed a daily ritual of bathing in milk, a practice she pursued with almost religious fervor, not for beauty, but as a desperate measure against her skin, which constantly blistered from disease, from the toxic powders she applied, and from a deep-seated shame. After her bath, she would donate the used milk to the impoverished, a gesture intended as a gift, yet one that tragically became a curse. Sick and hungry children drank this tainted milk, and slowly they succumbed, afflicted by boils, fevers, and profound lethargy. No one ever connected their demise to the milk. Why would they? Charity, much like royalty itself, was considered beyond reproach. And so the milk continued to flow, and the rot, both literal and metaphorical, continued its insidious spread. The truly profound horror lies in this. Despite all evidence, they genuinely believed themselves to be clean. Their conviction stemmed from their outward appearance, from the ambergris perfumed gloves they wore, and from their gowns that rustled with a sound akin to hymns. Yet beneath this facade of perfection, a different reality existed. Skin that hadn't known water for months, gums that bled from the sweetness of too many crushed rose petals, and hearts that quickened only when the air grew thick with their own stagnant breath. The courtiers, in a macabre adaptation, developed intricate olfactory maps of the palace. They instinctively knew which corridors to avoid after midday, and when to hold their breath, not out of awe for royalty, but out of sheer mercy for themselves. Handkerchiefs, once symbols of flirtation, transformed into vital weapons of survival, soaked in lavender and pressed firmly against the nose. They mastered the art of smiling while secretly begging, of bowing deeply while their bodies burned with discomfort, and of standing perfectly in formation around a monarch whose bowels might empty mid-ceremony. Etiquette manuals meticulously instructed not only silence of speech, but also silence of scent. No one dared to speak of the unsightly stain, only of the exquisite embroidery. Rot was not merely hidden, it was ritualized. The king's surgeon diligently recorded every abscess, the queen's maid meticulously painted over every sore, and priests solemnly anointed boils with holy oil. No one dared to name it decay. Instead, it was euphemistically referred to as divine suffering. For once rot is named, it demands treatment, and treatment in turn demands truth. And truth, Wei knew, would inevitably collapse the entire throne. A foreign ambassador, in a chilling letter, once wrote, "They move like angels and smell like tombs." This was not poetic flourish, but a stark articulation of the truth, a truth so dangerous that he was recalled within a mere fortnight. Then came Versailles, the famed jewel of France, which was in reality a gilded trap. 10,000 bodies inhabited a single palace with no proper plumbing, transforming the Sun King's grand vision into a labyrinthine expanse of human waste and cloying perfume. Chamber pots frequently overflowed, curtains bore unsightly stains, and the very chapel stairs became slick with urine. Women would discreetly relieve themselves behind columns, while men openly urinated off balconies, even during solemn mass. The Queen herself, on one infamous occasion, was literally struck by falling feces, not metaphorically. Yet, despite these grim realities, it was still heralded as the very center of civilization. This monumental delusion persisted because the myth of grandeur shone brighter than the pervasive stench, and because appearances, it seemed, were far more resilient than decaying bodies.
The children of Versailles, born into this peculiar world, learned to navigate their earliest steps by skillfully dodging puddles of human waste. They grew up breathing the noxious blend of methane and musk, believing this grotesque reality to be entirely normal. For when one is born within a gilded cage of rot, it is all too easy to mistake it for heaven until the walls inevitably crack, until the wind shifts, and until the angry mob finally arrives. This is because rot, in its profound decay, always invites the flies, and those very flies inevitably bring revolution.
The French Revolution, often attributed to oppressive taxes, truly began with a scent. It ignited with the chilling realization that the supposed gods of monarchy were far from clean, that their divine right reeked not of sanctity, but of human waste and cloying powder. Behind every gleaming crown there lay a festering skull, and the throne itself, from its very foundations, was constructed of rot. Now, in our modern era, we look back, touring grand palaces, marveling at intricate lace, infinite mirrors, and dazzling chandeliers. We wear headphones, listening intently as guides recount, "This was where the Queen received her esteemed guests." But they omit the crucial detail. This was where she bled from her scalp, while a rat nested undisturbed in her hair. For even today, we collectively prefer the comforting narrative, choosing to walk through history cloaked in perfume, But tonight I will not offer you the sanitized story. Instead, I will share the scent, the raw essence of truth. The truth, you see, has a distinct smell. It is sour, heavy, and warm, a scent that stubbornly refuses to fade when the music begins. It lingers in the ancient fabrics, within the solemn portraits, and deep within us. For power, when left unexamined, inevitably rots. Silence, when allowed to fester, becomes a wound, and no amount of shimmering gold can ever truly gild a festering wound. So, as you drift into slumber, I leave you with this thought. Next time you behold a crown, dare to look beneath its gleaming surface. Next time you hear of a grand legacy, ask yourself what it truly smelt like. When you speak of kings, consider how many boils they endured. And next time you dream of grandeur, gently question if you are not, in fact, dreaming of rot. Because history is not a clean, sterile museum. It is a corpse draped in silk, and, unsettlingly, it is still warm. Now, as the echoes of these stories fade, may you find peaceful rest and reawaken refreshed.